Hello from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection Submerged Lands and Environmental Resources Program. This presentation will be on mitigation. Before discussing mitigation, it is important to understand why wetlands and other surface waters require protection. Florida's wetlands and other surface waters are important because they perform many functions necessary to support the natural environment and our quality of life. The first few slides will explain the functions and services provided by wetlands. Plants, bacteria, and certain soil conditions found in wetlands create a highly efficient, natural filtration system for rain and stormwater runoff. Wetland bacteria and plants remove nitrogen, phosphorus, and other pollutants from surface waters and convert them into forms that are less toxic to fish and wildlife. The filtered water is then slowly released into streams, lakes, oceans, and aquifers. This process prevents algal blooms, fish kills, dead zones, and contamination of our surface and groundwaters. Wetlands and other surface waters provide spawning ground, nesting areas, food sources, and drinking water for many kinds of plants and animals. A variety of these plants and animals are directly important to our human economy and recreation. Some examples are shrimp, gamefish, ducks, alligators, and wading birds, and many other species serve as a food source that support the economically valuable species. Some species that live in or depend on wetlands are threatened or endangered. Wetlands are usually found in the lowest lying areas of a landscape. Because wetlands exist in low-lying areas, they naturally collect and store water and act as a buffer during storm events. This buffer helps to prevent water from flooding the higher elevation areas that are used for residential, commercial, and other types of human development. When a wetland is filled or impacted, its important functions are lost. If a wetland is filled, it can no longer support the plant life, bacteria, and soil conditions necessary to serve as a filtration system for water. These filled areas often become a source of pollutant-laden runoff by diverting the flow of water directly to a surface water. When a wetland is partially impacted but not entirely destroyed or filled, the natural filtration capacity is reduced. Alteration of wetlands through activities like dredging can create a sink where pollutants are no longer filtered and can settle to the bottom and degrade the water quality. Filling a wetland removes the buffer between the low-lying areas and higher elevations during storm events. The wetland can no longer act as a water storage system to help prevent flooding and coastal erosion. By altering the natural hydrology of an area, downstream flooding often becomes an issue. When wetlands are filled, habitat is lost for the plants and animals that live there. The plants can no longer provide shelter, food, and a nursery ground for fish and wildlife. The wildlife that use the area for food, drinking water, spawning, and nesting become displaced and have to find somewhere else to live. What can you do to reduce the loss of wetlands? Losses can be reduced by eliminating and reducing your wetland impacts as much as possible. Elimination of impacts means moving the proposed project to an area where it will not impact wetlands or other surface waters. If wetland impacts cannot be completely eliminated, then impacts should be reduced to the greatest extent possible. Reduction means taking steps to make any unavoidable impacts as small as possible. Reduction can include making a building footprint smaller, using a piling-supported structure instead of a fill pad, or rearranging the way a project is planned to make the impact area smaller. Any remaining impacts will require mitigation. When you are finished with this video, please view our video about elimination and reduction of impacts for more information and examples. What is mitigation? You just learned that impacts to wetlands like dredging, filling, or building things in, on, or over them causes a loss of wetland functions. Section 404 of the Federal Clean Water Act states there can be no net loss of wetland functions in the United States. So if the law says there can be no net loss of functions, how can we permit impacts to wetlands? Government agencies realize that sometimes it is necessary to impact wetlands in order to construct homes, businesses, roads, and other infrastructure. That's where mitigation comes in. Mitigation is increasing wetland functions at a location outside of your project area to compensate for the functions lost due to wetland impacts. The increase in wetland functions is called functional gain. To meet the requirements for no net loss of wetland functions, the functional gain must be equal to or greater than the functional loss caused by the wetland impact. It is through the use of appropriate mitigation that government agencies are able to permit wetland impacts. How is mitigation accomplished? Mitigation is accomplished by restoring, enhancing, creating, or preserving wetlands in a way that replaces the functions lost due to impacts. Mitigation should be done like for like. This means offsetting your impacts to a certain kind of wetland by restoring, enhancing, creating, or preserving the same kind of wetland within the same watershed. For example, if the project impacts a wet flatwood, then the mitigation should also involve a wet flatwood. If the impact is to a cypress swamp, then the mitigation should also involve a cypress swamp, and so on. Next, we will discuss some of the most common questions DEP receives from property owners about mitigation. My project and impacts are small. Why do I have to provide mitigation? It might seem that one project won't make much of a difference to Florida as a whole, but think about how many wetlands or other surface waters across the state have been or will be converted to other uses. It is estimated up until the mid-1970s, when state and federal regulatory programs were enacted, Florida lost over half of its wetlands it historically contained due to development. Every time a wetland or other surface water is destroyed or impacted, we lose habitat, flood control, and some water quality. The impacts add up quickly. If nothing was done to make up for this loss, our water quality would continually get worse, our wetland-dependent species that we count on for food or recreation would disappear, and our homes, parks, and businesses would be at a greater risk of flooding. That situation would not only degrade the quality of our natural environment, but also pose serious threats to human health and safety. How do I know how much mitigation my project requires? Not all wetlands function equally. Some have different functions than others and support different kinds of plants and wildlife. Each wetland filters water, nutrients, and toxins in a unique way and releases water to different places like a lake, stream, pond, ocean, or directly to an aquifer. Some are higher quality and perform more functions than others. Some types of wetlands are rare and require additional protection. To be fair to the public and to the environment, Florida uses a scoring method called the Uniform Mitigation Assessment Method, also known as UMAM, to figure out the value of a wetland based on its quality and the functions it performs. How does UMAM scoring work? The wetland that is to be impacted is given a point score before impacts based upon its ecological value. The wetland is scored again after proposed impacts are accounted for. The difference between the before and after impact score is considered the functional loss. The functional loss is then multiplied by the acreage of impact to determine how many quality points a person must make up through mitigation, either on or off-site. The area used to offset impacts through restoration, enhancement, creation, or preservation is called the mitigation site. The mitigation site is also scored using UMAM. The site is given a score before mitigation activities take place, and then another score considering the enhanced, preserved, restored, or created wetland functions after mitigation has been completed. The difference between the before and after scores is considered the functional gain per acre and is used to determine how many acres of mitigation a person needs in order to offset their functional loss. What kind of mitigation should I use? Mitigation should be done in kind or like for like. This means that the mitigation site should have the same or similar vegetation community that is providing or will provide the same wetland functions. For example, impacts to a salt marsh should be mitigated with a salt marsh, and impacts to hydric pine flatwoods should be mitigated with a hydric pine flatwood site. You will probably need more acreage of mitigation than your impact acreage. The reason for this is that you're replacing lost functions, not lost acreage. What are my mitigation options? One option is on-site mitigation. On-site mitigation is restoring, enhancing, creating, or preserving wetlands on the project site. It will require a detailed mitigation plan, monitoring plan, and a conservation easement to protect the site. A second option is off-site mitigation. It is done in the same way as on-site mitigation, but is done at a different location within the same watershed and within a reasonable distance from the impact site. The third and perhaps easiest option is purchasing functional gain credits from a mitigation bank. Your project must be within the bank's service area, and the bank must have the appropriate type of functional gain credits to match the type of wetland you are impacting. While the first two options, on-site and off-site mitigation, may require substantial time and effort on your part, when you purchase credits from a mitigation bank, your mitigation obligation is satisfied after you submit proof of purchase to the permitting agencies. What is a mitigation bank? A mitigation bank is a private sector business. A mitigation bank starts with a prospective mitigation banker buying a very large tract of land that contains degraded wetlands. The banker applies for and receives permits from FDEP and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The banker then works to earn wetland functional gain points by creating, enhancing, restoring, and preserving wetlands within the bank site and protects and guarantees the work forever. When the work is complete and successful, which usually takes several years, the banker receives functional gain points called credits. The banker then sells these credits to people who need them to make up for their wetland functional loss. Thank you for watching this video. If you have questions or need help with mitigation, please contact your local DEP district office. Contact information is available at the link below. Please watch our other videos for more information about permitting hot topics.